Welcome to the Philip Wiley Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Philip Wiley.
Hello and welcome to another episode. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. On this episode, we have Robert Pace from Invitation Homes joining, and Vivek Ramachandran, the founder of SquareX, former founder of Pentester Academy. So we were kind of talking before the episode started, so I'm really excited for this conversation. So before we kick it off, why don't we kind of share some backgrounds? Robert, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing with the listeners your background.
First of all, thank you, Philip. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Looking forward to discussion with Vivek. For information purposes, my name is Robert Pace, VP and CISO at Invitation Homes. I've been in the industry over 25 years. Started off at a telco in the old system of understanding telecommunication. That was pretty much a good learning point because being the young guy, I was throwing everything. So they say, hey, yeah, let the young guy set this up. Oh, firewall. Yeah, look, give it to that young guy. Give it to that young guy. And it was just a great learning for me. And from that, had a chance to go into consulting at PwC, had a chance to travel, and you understand how to look at risk from many different industry verticals, as well as the appetite of organizations is always key. It's one thing to have a discussion to shock and awe, but how do you fit that into the organization? And learned a lot from PwC. Went back in the industry, Textron, Bell Helicopter, had a top secret clearance and was able to work through many different elements. And it's a different aspect when you have the audit agencies right there and everything you're doing. They can see exactly, you have to take care of the points. And, going from a defense contractor, from a commercial side, lives versus livelihoods, it takes on a different persona. And, rich career led to retail, Dell Services, and was at a credit card processing organization where I had to go through 5 different PCI rocks. So it was a lot of work, and ultimately landed here at Invitation Homes, where we're really thriving in the single family residential industry, and we make that house a home. We provide those services to you so you can just live. We take care of everything for you. And as such, it allows me to go left and right throughout the organization. And that's the part I love being a CISO. You should have that ability to speak to anybody, learn from everyone, but also be that calm voice in the room to ensure that the services can be consumed in a very risk tolerant and protected manner.
And Vivek, since it's been a while since the last episode with you, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing your background for the people that may be watching the podcast for the first time.
Yeah. Thanks, Philip, for having me on the show. And once again, very honored. Robert, thanks for making time as well. And, thank you for that very detailed background. And I can relate to the kind of energy you have when describing things in cybersecurity. So yeah, really honored to be on the show with you. I've interestingly, this is also my 25th year. So when you said 25 years, I was like, okay, dates us probably, almost the same timeline.
Yes.
So my background has been, I started off primarily breaking cybersecurity. So I really loved finding vulnerabilities, exploits and all that, spoken at DEF CON, Black Hat, many years. And this was the time I quickly figured people wanted to learn more about the offensive security side. So around, I think 14 years back, ended up starting SecurityTube.net, which became Pentester Academy. That company got acquired. And during Pentester Academy, I spoke to so many red teams, around the world, Fortune 500 companies, government agencies. I started looking at unsolved problems, and that's really where initial access via the web browser was starting to become more and more important, where almost all employees now with hybrid work, BYOD, were starting to get targeted, when they're working remotely, spear phishing, malicious browser extensions, whatnot. And that is what led to, us starting SquareX. Was very fortunate to have a large part of my previous team work with me. And yeah, I mean, SquareX, quick recap, we ended up raising roughly around 6 million from Sequoia Capital, 3 to 4 million from angels, and now we are moving towards a Series A round. Company's around 2 years old. Primarily, all our customers' deployments are based out of North America, and now we are also starting to see some traction in Southeast Asia as well. So that's I guess what me and SquareX have been doing.
Yeah, it's very awesome and a really cool product. I haven't got to see the enterprise version, but I was really amazed at how easy the plugin, the free version, is to be able to use in your browser. And it's kind of funny. One of the things I share on some of the previous episodes of the podcast is how, I had like a direct message on Twitter that someone had sent me, and I copied the URL and used like URL scanner.io, and it came back as not really showing it as being malicious. But then I opened it in SquareX, and it opened it up in a sandbox, took me to a website that was hosted out of Russia, and it was like malware or something like that, a malware site. So these other tools that people have been relying on to test to see if things were secure kind of didn't really do the job that time.
Yeah. Thanks, Philip. I can tell you what's been happening is, using URLs and domains as a trust factor to decide whether to allow or disallow something, I think is starting to break as a construct. I mean, simple example is what you mentioned, people are starting to host malware on GitHub, SharePoint.com, and almost all of these domains are whitelisted by organizations. And this is really where I think applying zero trust principles to every single component of a page, what is getting downloaded, is important. And that was SquareX's original vision. But yeah.
So yeah, kind of getting into some of the industry-specific threats. Robert, Invitation Homes kind of stands out because you have a dedicated fraud prevention page, which is kind of rare among consumer-facing companies. Can you share the story behind this initiative?
Sure, and I think it's very basic education, with the key point of having residents. You want to make sure they're aware, and you identify the do's and the don'ts, and taking a very pragmatic approach to ensuring that a person can trust, understand, yes, the company has a responsibility, but also being able to educate and making sure that person is aware of what could be considered bad, and if something happens, what you should do. But again, forewarned versus forearmed. That was the key point. And with the collection of information that we've seen a lot, we've heard a lot, and to turn that around and allow our residents to have a quick spot to go to, get that information, we just thought it was the right thing to do, and it has worked out. Now, thank you for highlighting that for us, because it's one thing to have a very viable service and be very known in the industry, but how are you giving back? It's not always that volunteer work, but it's every one of those residents, educate each person along the way, because you're making them stronger so they can't get lured into something that could be wrong in the future. And that's what we really want to make sure, educate, and that in turn can make a very, very good relationship with your residents, and they want to come back because they understand you have the best interests at heart.
Yeah, that's great, because I think as a whole, industry wise, and just as far as people outside of, commercial settings, the only way we're really going to make things more secure is the more we educate. And Correct. So when you're educating people there, then hopefully that will transfer into other areas and make them more safe. So that's great that you're doing that.
I look at that, and a quick analogy to tailgate on that point is look at the educational institutions. The alumni says, hey, you should go to this institution. They produce great people. And it just perpetuates. It just grows and grows and grows. And the beauty of it also is that you don't become so static that you can't modify what is going on. It could be a new trend. You have to understand and adjust to the trend, just like educational institutions. They're adjusting to the trends that they see based on the graduates. And they come back and say, this is what we're seeing. That faculty can listen, you make the change, and hence you have a new academic curriculum for those new sets of cohorts going through there. so they can be more educated and now emerge as very good products of that institution.
And for Vivek, kind of on the same note, unlike most security solution websites, SquareX features over 30 product demo videos showcasing real-world use cases. So what inspired you to take this transparent, hands-on approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just doubling up on Robert's point is a lot of it is just building awareness and showing people, exactly what is out there. Of course, I mean, I know in the enterprise security space, most of the time, everything is behind a sales call wall. And, you only have very high level marketing jargon around what the product does. And then you need to hop on a call to understand. And I felt like 25 years as a cybersecurity person, we all pride ourselves of being able to cut through the bullshit, being able to look at something and say, okay, this makes sense for me and this doesn't. So, Philip, I wanted to apply to that, or rather appeal to that sensibility that all security people have. And rather than wasting people's time and, getting them on a call, our perspective was, hey, look, very transparently, this is the problem we solve. These are over 70 to 80 common use cases. And here is an exact demo of what the product would do, including exactly how the product looks like. We've seen over the past, few months since we started, going online with the product is people appreciate this. The calls are more interesting because, they've already done their level 0 analysis. The questions are more pointed. And yeah, I mean, it's been fairly delightful to take this approach and kind of break away from typical enterprise, contact sales pages.
So just one thing I'm kind of curious about, Vivek, did your experience run an education company and an educator kind of influence this?
Yeah, 100%. I love making videos. I love, speaking to people, talking, trying my best to contribute what I can. So I think any chance that I can get to jump back and make another, informational video, I probably do that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because Pentester Academy and SecurityTube was some of my first resources when I was starting out as a pen tester. So kind of takes me back to watching all those videos with Vivek, teaching different things. I went through his Python course and some other security courses. So he's a natural when it comes to education.
Thank you, Philip. Appreciate it.
So the real estate industry and browser security, Robert, what types of attacks do you see targeting users in real estate? How do these threats in this sector differ from other industries you worked in?
The interesting point, and Vivek, we go back years and years in the industry, 25 with you, 25 with me. I can say that risks do not discriminate. Vulnerabilities are just looking for that shortest pathway, the least amount of restrictions. It just goes to wherever it can. And from a point of understanding, even if you're public or you're private, you still have to manage the risk, the vulnerability. The brand is really the same for if you're public or private. So, Philip, very shortly, in a short manner, I would say there's no difference. There could be a difference on your reporting if something happens or what kind of framework you're using and then what you need to disclose, those kind of items. But at the core, that particular risk being exploited, and we're all the same out there. That's why it's so essential to communicate and understanding that path of least resistance is what will be exploited. You can do all the fancy elements, but did you cover the basic? If you're not covering the basic, that is, in this day and time, I think that's what gets exploited. In all of my time, I think I've tried to use the analogy of sports. I love sports. So why do you think the football teams go to spring training all the time? To go through the fundamentals all over again. Hey, this is what you need to do on the kickoff coverage, learn the new rules. Baseball does the same thing. A player may have been in the league years and years and years, but every baseball team will go through spring training, learn how to bunt or refine your skills in bunting, double plays, pickoff moves, etc. And in the cybersecurity realm, I think we have to go through the same element regardless of your market vertical, FinServe, tech, hospitality, insurance. What are the fundamentals you're doing? Do you understand the business of your company? And can you improve your mean time to detection if you're looking at it from that point. And then from a linear point, I love to think about it from a process side. What are you doing from the beginning to reduce that threat from the very beginning? That can be great because let's face it, nobody's security team is getting larger and larger and larger. You're going to be asked to do more with less, but you need to be innovative. You need to be an understanding element because as the CISO, you owe it to be business wise and manage the dollars in a good manner and also manage your technology stack. It's just not a Play Store. You have to be very conscientious of what you're doing to make sure you're getting the most value of it. So to go back, Philip, the risks are the same. It's maybe how fast your team can operate and maybe your reporting requirements based on the market vertical, but the risks do not discriminate.
Yeah, thinking of an analogy that kind of fits that, you kind of mentioned how industries are pretty similar and, the threat actors are looking for easy targets. It makes me think of the analogy where the two guys are out in the woods walking and they hear this bear coming up kind of quickly. And so I have kind of a background with bears, but so this story's special to me. So at any rate, this bear's coming up and this guy's getting ready to, it's like stretching and getting all set to run. And that guy says, "You can't outrun the bear." And he says, "I know, but I can outrun you."
There you go. Yes. That is it. That is it. And when you're looking like that, I think what we have to do as CISO to make sure you're educating your team on that process. I mentioned that earlier. It's one thing to be enamored with a lot of technology, but if you don't have a good process and you can't tell the story on what you're doing and why you're doing it, that's going to be a problem. You're not going to be able to get all the support you need. And the challenges we have, and Vivek, I know you can see this. We got to educate. We have to know the business. Now we have to be on top of the technology, and you got to develop your people. Oh, and then by the way, you got to understand your mean time to detection, your mean time to response, your mean time to communication. Whoa, slow down and just think about the process. You're trying to honestly think of linear flow. How do we go assembly line of a car? How do we take that, go from left to right? No loops, just go left to right, single piece flow, and see if you can put out a viable product. Learn along the way. It may speed up or it may slow down, but think of linear process. That's going to be the best way because I think one of our nemesis is rework. Rework kills us.
You're kind of thinking along the same lines of the different industries and how the attacks are evolving, including, industries like real estate. Can you share more about how SquareX's BDR solution is geared to handle the threats that traditional EDR solutions are missing?
Yeah. So there's slight lag here. Yeah. So, Philip. So I think, just to kind of build up on what like Robert says before I kind of, answer the question, I think Robert, you brought up a great point. A lot of it is awareness, how to make sure that, employees are participating as well in the whole process. Mm-hmm. And one of the key things that we figured is, given almost all attackers are now starting to target employees via spear phishing attacks, there's a new version of ChatGPT, and someone throws out a browser extension saying, hey, if you install it, you're going to get free access to the latest pro version of ChatGPT and whatnot. And, people just go install that.
Vivek, isn't free good? Isn't free good?
It's good for the attackers for sure, and maybe for security vendors, because then we get to come in later. But and that is really where, just to double down, one of the things we noticed is in an organization, there is this massive spread in the spectrum of risk profile of individual employees. Some folks, every CISO knows are repeat offenders, right? Even if there is a corporate policy, don't do this, don't do that, they will still go ahead, visit the more riskier sites, do the more, kind of like downloading files, from places where you might expect malicious macros to be there and things like that. So, absolutely agree with, what you kind of mentioned. And that is really where kind of segueing into, Philip, what you asked. I think for a very long time, EDRs and XDRs have been a cornerstone simply because, people were downloading EXCs, installing it. And that's really where an EDR, XDR is very good at, discovering hey, this exe contains a ransomware, malware, right? Like whether it's CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, whichever companies are out there. But in the last few years, what's happened is the browser has become the endpoint, if you think about it, right? Employees are spending 90% of their time on the browser, maybe 10% in applications like Outlook. And in that 90% time, they're accessing cloud storage because everything is online, right? SaaS services because no one downloads and installs software anymore. And that is really where what we figured is today EDRs and XDRs need to wait for a malicious file to get downloaded and someone trying to open it up, and that's when they end up triggering. While the attack landscape has completely changed, where there are many attacks which the entire life cycle is in the browser itself. So let's say an SSO hijacking attack, somebody can go ahead and have a gullible employee, sign in with their SSO, get access to their drive, and completely exfiltrate data without ever touching the endpoint. The malicious browser extension, right? ChatGPT clone, people end up installing it, and that siphons out passwords as people enter login forms or exfiltrates data. None of it ever touches the endpoint. So what we started realizing was that if you are waiting for an EDR, XDR to light up, that's already too late. And instead, if you're able to detect all of these attacks in the browser, you are actually stopping much of this upstream. So the best analogy I like to put is a lot of people say, hey, shift left, right? Like move from testing to architecture and make all of that secure. Our little mantra is shift up or shift upstream, which is even before something ends up hitting the endpoint, discover it in browser memory, kill the attack, don't allow the attack chain to propagate. And so that is really where we kind of felt, this approach was more with the times, given everybody is almost like a SaaS first, cloud first native using the browser rather than installed products on the endpoint.
Yeah, and this sure makes it a lot easier for the threat actors seeing all these different web-based applications now compared to in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of to shift the conversation, because, there's a lot of bring your own device, and like beginning around the pandemic, a lot more remote work started happening. And even some companies have kind of stuck with that. Some companies or startups are purely remote, and some are kind of having to do that to not miss out on some talent. So there's definitely some challenges there. So Robert, as an organization managing over 80,000 homes, Invitation Homes likely handles a lot of remote interactions. What's your stance on BYOD and remote work policies? And are they a challenge or opportunity?
Yeah, first of all, to everybody that's listening, all the CISOs, I think that everybody did a phenomenal job when COVID first hit. We kept the organizations operating. That was great. But I will say, I believe in times of past, we probably would have did a lot of site visits. We didn't get a chance to do a site visit to everybody's home to figure out what was happening. So from that perspective, I think the browser is and will be that key central tool, because everybody wants to be light, dynamic. And if you can't understand the complete setup, the lightest element possible, bringing forth the browser. Vivek mentioned, if companies are operating with a lot of SaaS applications, it makes it the key tool that you can put into that tool belt. And if you can control that tool, you don't need it. You can be light and nimble as you would want. And you don't know, honestly, what's going on at that remote location. You really don't. So that makes us uncomfortable, but we have to deal with it. Now let's go to the items we can deal with, and controlling everything at the browser. My thoughts and views on being able to control it at the browser. Let's not consider the role-based access control, but I would like to submit going into the policy base, using that browser with sets of policies that can be applied. I think that will be a way to help manage that. And we'll steal from Vivek. We got to shift it left, up. I like both of that. We might be on the diagonal too. And I would say that if all three of us was working at an organization and I needed access to my primary. I get my primary policy.
Yeah.
Philip, you come in, you working on the special project, you can check out your new policies based on that project. And Vivek, if you came in and you needed something that was not even allocated, you would just get a simple message say, it hasn't been allocated. So go back to whatever your project manager is, and that will be very clean. So we as the cybersecurity team, we don't have to answer the questions of why do you need that? Hey, I'm going to allocate based on what's there. If your policies have not been built for that profile, you're not going to get it. Apply that to the browser, make it nice and light, because that person could be working on many different form factors, but it's still a browser. Let's look at it from that point. You can take care of the who, and you know what they've been given at that. If you know the who and the what, man, I think we've really isolated that down to Philip can only get access to what that set of policies identified, right? And we know that's Philip. We can come back and do some adaptive authentication just to make sure over time and those points, but at least you know the who and you isolate to what they can do. Man, that is good. And if you are allocating those policies, policy-based access control, not RBAC, role-based access control, the policy, because it could be dynamic. We shouldn't be the administrators of those dynamic or the creators and the requesters. Push that back to that PM team. If you're going to have a set of resources working on the item, submit that, let it get built, and then the person can check it out as they need to. That will be so dynamic, and just think the user experience will be really good. Nobody getting mad at security anymore. Whoa, wouldn't we love that? That would be great. Go back to the hey, did you put in the request to have those policies built? Oh, I forgot. Well, put it in so I can get my work done. Hey, you put it in, then the security team can deliver. So that is my dream. And I kind of veered off of it for a second, but it took me there when you said the remote and the hybrid, because it's all about how can we listen to our brethren in the business and get faster at what we do with integrity, confidence, and being able to monitor it. That will be, that's the interesting point. Vivek, I know we was chatting just a little earlier. We got kind of wrapped up in that, but I think that is a key point of how we can take that one element, the browser, and be as nimble as possible with that.
Yeah, I mean, Robert, you brought up some really great points. And, just to kind of like double down on them, I mean, the first one, which you kind of like hit it absolutely right, is having the ability to create work-centric policies for the same user. And so depending on, what project he's on, a different set of policies apply. And it should be, as you said, as nimble and seamless as he just opening up another browser profile. And now, everything just works magically, whatever has been set up for that specific project. I mean, I love that. This way, as we were discussing, the security team can create once and just monitor rather than repeatedly having to go back,
Yes.
Dismantle policies, what should we do now? And which is a lot of time just wasted on, unfortunately, administrative work, which, as you said, the PM team can very beautifully go ahead, decide right up front and apply. So, I love that. That's a fantastic use case on how probably a browser security solution should work.
Yeah, the PM team, they own the resources. We don't own the resources.
Yes, exactly.
Our job is to manage the risk in an intelligent manner. Let's do that. And if you could check out the right policies, then we'll get away from the age-old grandfathered access. You
Right.
wouldn't have that because you've been given to exactly what's been built. Nothing more, nothing less. If
Yeah.
there's something wrong with that, let's go back to the original submitter of those set of policies and say, you need to make an augmentation, but then they can make it based on facts of that project. But man, that I think to me, that will be just a dynamic ability to deliver and make the security team, all those cybersecurity resources, nobody gets mad at us anymore because we can deliver and we're operating at the speed of business,
Yeah.
single piece flow. Just let it go. And you can retire items also. When it's time to retire, just think from a PCI perspective, you can look at ciphers. Oh, I need to deprecate it. Oh, okay, wait a minute. We don't need this anymore. Let's deprecate. That makes it easy. to go
Correct.
through the work processes. So your inventory is small and manageable, and not just, we've seen that in the past. I think Philip has done it. Vivek, you've done it. I've done it. Build just like. Well, what is that? That's fast, but it didn't have the right integrity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear it right is, if not done well, exactly the way you've kind of mentioned, over a longer period, this just becomes a whole policy spider web. It's almost
Yes.
like on a per user basis, you need to untangle which groups he's part of, what has been applied, and becomes a nightmare. The moment a user shifts a team or something else happens, and now all of a sudden, that becomes like half an hour worth of work.
Yeah.
Just to untangle him from his previous policy set and kind of migrate him to new ones. So,
And just think how you could apply that if you have any contractors or somebody coming up short. You know what to give them at that point in time, because if it's a contract, you should have a signed statement of work. That means there's been some business discussion. You know what the deliverables are. You talked about the risk and the key points of success with that project, and that had to include the access, so you can build that in advance. And again,
exactly.
just provide the order to the cybersecurity. Let's build it. You know that's allocated for that SOW or those set of contractors on that SOW. Man, self-contained, identify, and you can monitor that when it's time to end that project. The access is going to end. You don't need that profile anymore. Let's just revoke it, and real easy. Because if you take away that access in that browser, nothing else.
Yeah. No, I think you brought it up like a very, very good point is if you make policies work-centric and move people in and out,
Yes.
rather than trying to create people-centric policies and try to re-architect every time, it is so much more simpler and so much more logical, right? Like, I mean, just to build on what you said, is a BYOD contractor has a specific set of policies and that's it. Like any new BYOD contractor comes in, automatically gets in that rather than, hey, is he working on this versus that? And let's try to create these granular policies to accommodate. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
I think that's key. And I think we also can be better and contribute to managing costs a little bit better. You may not need that. Nothing wrong with a VDI solution. The folks that's using that's fine. But if we're thinking forward, how can we be a little bit more nimble?
Yeah.
A little bit more proactive to meet the needs of that ask. And even sometimes having it ready before the ask get there, but being able to provision based on the ask, that will be a good item. And it would be really good if we could just take some of the security professionals out of that. And Philip, when you check in, boom, you get the profile that has been allocated. That's it. If it hasn't been there, go back again to the PM, as we mentioned. I mean, that almost like a self-service, if that makes sense. Let's get it faster where we can get back and start looking at the anomalies of something that's going on. Oh, this guy put in the request for this policy, then somebody else did one real quick. Well, they're trying to give me the system. Let's go talk to them. And then, no, you cannot do that. You must do X. Those are the points. If we can allow our resource to look at it from more of an anomaly base instead of trying to look at every item,
Yeah.
I think that would just make us better because our teams are small and we get a little bit of that screen fatigue. So you just want to get the items that truly need attention and then let the system operate as designed.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, totally agree. And you
And I
brought
went way off on that, Vivek. I'm sorry. I did
no, I think it's a great point, and you brought up something, right? Like VDIs, and unfortunately, how organizations still have to kind of like use them. I mean, I call VDIs the BlackBerry of our times. It unfortunately has to go, but it's still putting up like a big fight. But yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, we had to deal at VDIs as some former places of work. But the cool thing is too, is also with SquareX, is you look at environments where people are using Chromebooks for, because a lot of cases you're not needing a lot of computing power. People are using Chromebooks to communicate. So having a product like SquareX makes that easy. So there's nothing, that you have to worry about any kind of complications of it not working on that platform.
Philip, I think you hit on the key point right there. When you're at the project planning meetings and you're hearing things just go on, if you know that automatic you have a solution that can be applied in a very light manner, right? That would be really great. Or yeah, just have a set of Chromebooks right there in case something happened to your asset. Here's a Chromebook, boop, here's a profile. There you go. And that works because the user, that form factor really should make a difference. You just need to get on that browser, get to that SaaS application and do what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Robert, just to kind of like double click on that, you brought up a great point. Is the big reason that we took a browser extension approach is we didn't want, security teams to go about managing yet another application, yet another agent. And by being a browser extension, you just fire a registry entry automatically, Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Safari, they become managed browsers. They get the extension, it just auto updates. So it's fire once, forget about it, just deploy policies at any given point. So we figured like security teams also hate having to go through that whole process of deployment, updating, figuring out if something broke. And I hate to bring this up, but a post CrowdStrike, kind of issue era, nobody wants anything to become a single point of failure.
And just imagine the road warriors that may be out there. Yeah. Their calls to the help desk can be managed so much easier, right? Exactly. When your help desk personnel pretty much understand, hey, maybe shut down the browser, or let me kill that. Let me redistribute the feedback that you need. Boom, there you go. Good to go. I mean, that will really allow that road warrior to be much more nimble. They're in the airport. They can be addressed, and before they get to the location, they're done, or they walk in the meeting after a quick 10-minute break. Just imagine getting everything resolved in quick 10 minutes and getting back to work. I think that would be awesome. And, what you mentioned, Vivek, just understanding it's plugins, it's the browser. You guys are keeping it simple.
Yeah. No, I think you brought up a very good point. Is the whole, customer support, the whole tech support, the whole debugging when something goes wrong is also a lot easier to kind of do remotely. Because you are talking to something which is sitting in the browser itself. That's a great point. Yeah, I agree.
And on the topic of remote workforces, BYOD, how does SquareX handle like BYOD devices and remote work?
Yeah, so Philip, the way we kind of do it is two flavors. One is the browser extension can automatically integrate with the IDP, whether you use Microsoft Entra, Okta, Ping Identity, whatever it might be. And that way, what happens is that, let's say a third-party contractor or, one of your employees using your BYOD device, when they try to open up any of your internal websites, depending on the policies you've applied, we can immediately go check if, those policies are being honored. If not, we'll actually not allow them to log into your corporate websites. So as a simple example, let's say, you require a posture check on a BYOD device you don't control, where you say, we at least want the user to have an antivirus, firewall turned on, no screenshotting tool to be running. Sitting in the browser and with a helper app, we are able to go ahead, look at this, and you can apply a policy saying, look, if this isn't enabled, block access to the enterprise. And this way, we are able to go ahead, regulate access, make sure there is good security posture on that device before people, end up connecting to a corporate website. And interestingly, almost everyone, Microsoft, Google, depending on whatever IDP that you may be using, support context-aware security and conditional access. And those are things that we use to, enable this entire set of features.
So kind of to pivot the conversation over to research innovation. So Vivek, at DEF CON 32, your team was invited on the main stage to share your findings on secure web gateways. Can you share more about what was presented and why it's a significant finding for the industry?
Yeah. So I think, this goes back almost to the Pentester Academy days when I was talking to red teams, and everybody has a SASE SSE secure web gateway. And at that time, that is when I kind of like noticed there were so many architectural vulnerabilities which attackers could bypass, which, these vendors had not disclosed properly to all their customers. And that is what prompted the research, because, at this point in time, if you want to detect client-side web attacks, and if you use a cloud proxy, Unfortunately, just looking at network data, how can you figure out application layer attacks beyond a certain level of complexity? Now, SASE, SSE, SWGs, these were invented, 10, 15 years back. At that time, the browser was a very simple rendering engine, right? It just took HTML, CSS, JavaScript, showed you the website, you clicked on it. We needed to refresh the Gmail page. I mean, we all remember, right? To get to see what new mail was there. But today, browsers are full-blown application platforms. And the best example I give people is, at one point, you needed to install Adobe Photoshop locally to work, right? But now everybody just uses Creator Suite right on the browser. Now, the reason that's possible is the browser vendors have innovated new technologies like WebAssembly are enabling all of this, but they're also enabling the attackers. So now imagine that someone's downloading a malicious file. SASE, SSE, Secure Web Gateway will look at it in the cloud and say, okay, this looks malicious, I'm going to block it. But new age attacks, the attacker never forces a download of a malicious Excel in the browser with JavaScript. He ends up creating the whole Excel right here and then drops it, which means a network traffic monitoring appliance is unable to look at any of those attacks. So this is what we really talked about over 2021 examples. None of this is fixed. I don't even think it can be, simply because you can't emulate what's happening in the browser in the cloud without things like user interactivity, what's going on, a host of other things. It was pretty well received. All the big vendors are speaking to us using our test site. Many of their customers are hitting our test site. But I feel hopefully this should bring in a transformation that client-side web attacks requires a browser native, browser first-class citizen security solution.
So, Robert, how does staying informed about the latest security trends shape your strategy at Innovation Home?
I think what you just heard from Vivek makes my case is that you got to work with your vendors. You got to work with the vendor because their whole business purpose is to understand that their R&D teams may be bigger than your whole organization. And it's understanding on a global basis what's going on, what's being exploited. They have the reach into the customer base so they can tell you, oh, we're seeing this in, this particular region, or we're seeing this. And, oh, by the way, A and B equals C. Those are all the things that you want that security vendor to bring to you, because your job as the CISO at that organization is to manage the risk within your organization. It would be cool, don't get me wrong, if you had time and the budget for a big old lab and want to do all those points, but that's not essential to your business purpose. Go back to your key elements. How are you supporting and enabling your business? Then how are you lined up with the vendor? So I say, what Vivek just mentioned, his ability to provide all of that information in a manner where me as a CISO or anybody else that's listening as a CISO can consume it, and I'll make the decision on what we want to do. That's what you want. Let the folks with the right expertise do the R&D. Your job is to apply that in a business-wise manner for your organization.
So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. So Robert, if you could implement one game-changing improvement in browser security today, what would it be and why?
I think I talked about that, being able to have that payback solution where we could just redefine those cybersecurity resources instead of just, okay, I built this and it's wrong. And then you got to talk about making sure that somebody else builds it. We have the platform to implement it. Then we look for the anomalies. I think that would be really great. And it would allow us to really start looking at what are the risk impact to our business, right? Not having resources dedicated to work through an issue. Oh, you forgot to give me, oh, I forgot to put that in. I don't need to see that. Push that over to that project team. Let them determine that, because that project may have an inability to complete because you don't have the right access. It's not my problem. It should be the project team's problem. So if they put in the right one, let's build those profiles and start to apply that. And think about how we can remove ourselves from being the core to just, my best analogy, single piece flow. And if you're looking at assembly line, we should be on the catwalk looking at the shop floor, and we see how the information is flowing. We don't need to be on the floor trying to do everything ourselves. We're not large enough. We don't have the right expertise at all times, and it takes us away. So if you're the smallest team, get on the catwalk. You can see the whole shop floor and understand, is there a problem? If you do need to swoop down, you swoop down, engage, and then you back up again. So that is my view. I think policy-based access control, if we can start to get that implemented, I think that allows us to pivot into a lot of different elements. Adaptive authentication. You could do different points if you're managing it from that browser, because if you have everybody in one location using one element, it's easier for you to manage, right? Instead of trying to guard 1,000 different doors, you're guarding that one element, that browser. If you don't enable it in that, and based on what Vivek mentioned, it's not going to happen. So you kind of go back to one of those old firewall rules. If not explicitly stated, it's denied, right?
So Vivek, looking forward, what excites you most about SquareX future, and what can CISOs like Robert expect from SquareX in the year 2025?
Yeah, I think, what's always excited me about what we are building is, given that we are becoming a browser first kind of native, generation, sitting in the browser, us being able to innovate on how to go ahead, block attacks and things like that, we actually feel almost we are building the next generation EDR, right? Assuming the browser is the new endpoint. And of course, there are a lot of challenges, right? Because this is almost like one of the very first attempts at somebody trying to build something like this as a full-blown browser detection response solution, just like an EDR. So I think, a lot of interesting challenges. We really get excited when we are able to solve attacks which we are seeing on customer websites. I can tell you, right before the US elections, there was this very large county, where we were kind of speaking with, and their elected executives were actually seeing a lot of attacks. And they ended up showing some of those attacks. We were able to quickly deploy policies to show them how we can, solve these problems, detect these attacks. So those aha moments of us being able to do these very, very hard to detect attacks, but being able to solve those in the browser, I think that's been exciting. 2025, that's the main focus of the company. Is primarily, the way I look at it, there are three things that, and Robert, feel free to correct me, if I'm wrong, three things that, most CISOs are concerned with. One is to make sure that, your internal policies are enforced, right? Which is, where you want people to visit, certain categories that you want to ban, certain things that you want to allow, disallow. The second thing people worry about is insider threats, right? Data exfiltration, somebody, going ahead and sending out company documents, data, whatnot. And the third is external threats, which is attackers actually trying to break into an organization. So our focus really is these three, where, how can SquareX sitting in the browser give access to, CISO like Robert, all the tools, all the mechanisms that he needs. And also, most importantly, spend time understanding what is the best way to deliver a solution, right? So Robert brought up a fantastic way, which is, hey, if there could be pre-canned policies that we can build on a per user profile, then this would be amazing, because we just build it once, fire and forget, just monitor. So speaking, understanding all of this feedback, coming back with solutions, because one is the raw nuts and bolts of, policies, detectors, monitoring, and all of that. The second is solving actual business use cases based on how organizations work. I think, Philip, that's our obsession, is just to understand how we can serve people better, how we can align best with how business flows in that organization, how to make, our product seamless, rather than people, organizations having to change their workflow to adapt a new security product. And we've all been there, right? It's painful. There is friction. So I think I would kind of bunch that under, overall, how do you build a seamless product aligning with an organization's objectives, along with, of course, still remaining extremely true and heavy duty when it comes to, detecting attacks?
Hey, Vivek, just that point there, and I like the way you outlined that from a CISO perspective. If we can lean out those processes, that browser being that key point where you're able to manage everything from that browser, it could be a light form factor that they're using.
Exactly.
You also inadvertently will reduce a lot of calls to the service desk, the help desk, because it is just, hey, if you don't have something, you could have a nice user UX that says, hey, user, you're not allowed to do this. You're at work in this profile. You can't go to your personal email. Very likely tell them what to do. They will manage themselves. And now you just reduce the call to the service desk, and it's a better experience. You mentioned the friction. We hear that a lot. What's the cybersecurity? The Department of No? No, I've heard this once, and I think it's great. It's not the we just want to know what you're doing. If we know what you're doing, and in this example, you can have the right profile built with the right policy so that feedback can be applied to that browser. There you go. You're going to be just that knowledge. When Philip knows, Vivek, and I know, that is collective knowledge. Now we can build solutions, and it works. And how do we take the cybersecurity folks from being the front line answering all those questions to let's get back to the back to address the anomalies, right? Yeah. If that process is working as designed, great. You got your control points. You can look at it. You want to look at the anomalies. So it's, hey, Vivek, we noticed we tried to do 1, 2, and 3, and wow, we didn't think that should work good. And that would allow you with the R&D to address that. I think that's a better collaboration for us as CISOs than the security vendors, how we collaborate more, lean out the process, and take us from being in every process. Lean that out.
Yeah.
It's better when you don't see us and we have a good functioning process. That means it was shifted left, it was designed properly, and operate as designed.
Yeah, I think you put it like very, very well. Absolutely, Robert. I think I totally agree with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very great insights, gentlemen. And I've really enjoyed this discussion. But sadly, we're down towards the end of the episode. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules. I'm sure that the viewers are going to get a lot of good insights from this episode.
Philip, I really appreciate this. Vivek, a great discussion. So thank you. Thank you both. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Thanks, Robert. And again, a lot of great insights and, a lot of great, I almost say good feature requests for us, which I kind of take back to the team. So yeah, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the discussion and appreciate all the feedback.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for listening to The Philip Wiley Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Philip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Philip Wiley. Until next time.